Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Kentucky Small Business Development Center's weekly webinar. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Dave Etkin. I'm the director of the SBDC Center here in Louisville, Kentucky. As you come in and get settled, I'd like to take a few minutes to share some information about the Kentucky SBDC program. The Kentucky Small Business Development Center program is a statewide program providing for the professional expertise, tools, and information necessary for entrepreneurs to start, fund, and grow their businesses. We do this at no cost, thanks to the U.S. Small Business Administration, the University of Kentucky, as well as regional universities, colleges, and economic development agencies. To learn more, visit KentuckySBDC.com, and there you'll find additional resources I know you'll find helpful. If you'd like to request personal assistance, shoot us an email at info@KentuckySBDC.com, or just give us a call at 1-888-414-7232. If you look to the right of your screen there, you'll see the chat feature. And if you have any questions for our presenters today, you can post them here and we'll answer them at the end of the presentation. And as always, just to test that everything's working and you can hear me and see me, do me a favor and just say hello and tell us your name and where you're joining from. It's like Nicholas has kind of jumped right in. He's from Lexington. Good to see you, Nicholas. Again, I'm Dave Etkin. I'm the director of the Louisville Center here. I'm one of 17 centers throughout the Commonwealth. And as always, later on today, we'll send you a recording of today's webinar so you can watch it over and over again. So we've been really talking a lot about employee retention lately, and we have some great guests. Dr. Hope Zoeller is founder and president of Hope LLC, a firm that specializes in facilitating leader success at every level of an organization. And Whitney Martin, who is the CEO of Proactive Consulting. She is a self-professed data nerd, and she is an expert in using predictive assessments for your employees and staff. So welcome. I'm really excited to see you guys today. This is something that we encounter all the time, and we're having some changes in our organization. So retention is top of mind for everybody. So I'm glad you guys are here to kind of talk through all this. So welcome. Oops. So I'm going to get you guys going here, and we'll go from here. So Hope, Whitney.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Dave. And it is great to be back with you. I was talking with Whitney and Dave right before we got on this afternoon, and I realized that it was about a year ago that I did one of these webinars, and the topic that we talked about at that time was leading with care through challenging times. And so, here we are about a year later, and we're still talking about how to lead with care through challenging times. And it's really so much now around caring for our leaders. How do we do that, and how do we do that successfully? And, as Whitney and I, we're just, collaborating and doing things with, around the data and looking at what's happening in organizations. We just thought that, this is a really important topic to bring to you, to talk about, just around, how do we better support our leaders and how do we use data to do that? And now more than ever, just with the, the competition for people, and, there's so many organizations hiring right now, how do we go about, how do we retain, and how do we help our leaders be able to do that? And it was interesting. I was at a restaurant last night, a small local restaurant, and had a wonderful, wonderful waiter. But we got into a conversation with him about the fact that there's only 3 waiters working at this restaurant right now, and how strapped they are with all of that, and they're doing the best that they can to keep the restaurant going afloat. And while some of you may not have that little of employees, it is a real issue on how do we do that? How do we encourage and support our leaders to be able to support their people so that they want to stay and we all be successful? So I'm going to turn it over to Whitney for a moment, and she is going to give you a highlight and an overview of what we are going to share with you around why develop leaders and why now.
All right. I really appreciate the chance to be with you guys today. As was alluded to in our introductions, Hope and I make great partners because she has tons of experience with doing coaching and training and leadership development. And I bring kind of a data perspective to the game in terms of how do we get good, actionable data so that we know that those development activities are all pointed in the right direction. So we're going to blend our expertise today, and this is our agenda. So we'll talk first about data-driven leadership development. Just, how do you even start to go about the process of getting data to to determine that roadmap of where your leaders need to go. And we'll talk about 360s and different types of assessments and the role that they play in that. And then we'll talk about how to apply that and really do an effective job coaching and developing leaders in this current time that we're in. And then how to tie that all together so that it's not a one-off endeavor, that it's an integrated, holistic, sustainable, really initiative in your organization to develop leaders in a way that's meaningful and integrated with the rest of your initiatives.
Thank you, Whitney. All right, so thinking about this last year and a half that we've gone through, some people have been so challenged by what they've experienced. And, I don't think any one of us hasn't had some frustrations, and no more than leaders have had. And, how do we lead through all of this? How do we help and support our people? And so now when we're finally being able to come out of this, what do we want to become for having gone through that? And I think, as I said just a moment ago, I think now more than ever, putting the pause on this and taking a look at what did we learn over the last year and a half? As a leadership team, as an individual leader, what are some things that I want to, keep doing that were working really well? What did I discover that I needed to stop doing? And are there some things that are just necessary now that might not have been a year and a half ago that I as a leader need to start doing? So, I encourage you, and this can, happen on a group level or just really on an individual leadership assessment level of, what have I gotten from all this? And, if some of it's frustration, absolutely. But I also, again, think it's a really good opportunity to come up with some new and innovative ways that we can do things when we talk about people. So this was a study that was done by McKinsey and Company, and it showed that 69% of organizations are doing more skill building now than they did before the COVID crisis. And, going through the COVID crisis, if you had weak leadership, it became really apparent in the last year and a half that you did that. If you had strong leadership, it became apparent that, we need to continue to support those leaders in being strong. But with this particular study, what they found is that the skills that companies are increasingly focusing on is developing the social, the emotional, and the advanced cognitive of their teams and of their leaders. And as I said, I think that that's extremely important at this point right now, because as we're coming out of this, hiring is an issue, retention is an issue, probably more so than I can remember. And, and Whitney can possibly attest to this too, with all that she's seeing on the data side of it. But it is a real challenge for organizations now to not only retrain, but even to attract good people to do that. So when you think about, what is it that keeps people in an organization? And, why is it that right now we're telling you is the best time for action? People don't quit positions, they quit people. And Gallup did a study that showed 70% of the variance in employee engagement can be attributed to the leader. And if you think about all of the things that is impacted by engagement, when you think about retention, sales, customer service, hiring, all of that, why would we be not putting resources into the most important thing that influences whether people want to stay or go? And so I'm going to turn it over to Whitney to talk to you about the importance of that.
Absolutely. So there was a statistics that said 25% of employees have been sheltering in place during COVID. And so that means that as we are coming out of this, there's a good chance that about a quarter of your workforce is considering leaving or actively trying to leave. And as Hope mentioned, we're certainly seeing this, in the staffing shortages in every industry. And so the ability to get people to come to work and to stay with your organization or to switch to your organization, it's not about pay right now. It's not about, a lot of things, but it absolutely your leaders have such an opportunity to influence this. And as Hope said, 70% of the variance in employee engagement can be explained by leaders. That is just an absolutely staggering statistic. So, our first line of defense against this turnover tsunami is to invest in leaders and to ensure that they're keeping employees engaged at your organization. So as the quote on the screen says, 42% of workers who do plan to leave their company would give their organization a C or lower in terms of their efforts to maintain culture during the pandemic. And we know that leaders have a huge influence over keeping employees engaged and really translating and helping them connect to the culture of the organization. So, just so much hinges on the effectiveness of our leaders right now, even more so than in the past. We're expecting them to do their job differently, to do different things, but we also know that just this employee engagement and retention right now is critical, and that the leaders are really the way to affect those numbers. So as we think about how do we create a development plan that's actually meaningful, if you have a leader in your organization and you think, we really need to do a better job of developing this person, where do you start? Do you ask the individual, hey, where do you think you need to get better? Do you ask that person's boss, hey, where do you think this person needs to get better? If either of those is your strategy in determining what sorts of development initiatives are going to give you any sort of ROI, your plan is probably going to be a little bit flawed. So really determining what a leader needs to become more effective is got to be determined by a well-rounded group of stakeholders that tell us where they perceive this individual needs improvement or where they're already excelling. And so there are two different types of tools we're going to talk about here for a minute. 360-degree feedback will give us that above the watermark observation in terms of what behaviors are being consistently executed by this leader. And we're going to do a deeper dive on those. But we're also going to talk about some different types of assessments that might add some really valuable additional insight. And so we can look at, where development is needed in terms of these assessment tools. And the thing is, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. And so I know, Hope, you've had experience with this, just in terms of this, working with organizations who say, we need you to come in and develop a leader. Where do we go? How do you determine what direction to take that?
Absolutely. And, to this quote that's up here on the slide, I often say, I see leaders working really, really hard, driving the bus north, and they realize that their team is at the bus stop in the south. And so, it's great if you've been working really hard, but have you been working really hard in the right direction? And if you don't stop and assess that every once in a while, you can end up having a team that is no longer following you. And, I often say, it's not really the ones that quit and leave you that you have to worry about. It's the ones that may quit and stay. And, you're dealing with that now too, the people that are not motivated to be there, that don't, and that have they are no longer engaged in the organization, but they're hanging on until something else becomes available or something else better. So, as a leader, having a roadmap is extremely important. And when I, see 360 used in that way, and I've, been using the tools and assessments that Whitney is going to share with you, for the last 20 years, it is a roadmap. It is a roadmap to know what are my strengths? Where am I really good that I need to keep honing my craft with that? And then where are these areas? I don't necessarily call them weaknesses, but these areas of opportunity. And it's extremely important that every once in a while, I check in with that and just make sure that my roadmap is guiding me in the right direction. And, there's got to be, I can't stress enough the importance of having data around that, because I work with so many leaders that they will just tell me, it's in my gut, I just know it. And it's like, well, okay, I will give you that gut might be one data point, but you better surround it by a whole bunch of data points if you want to end up in the right place.
Yeah, and kind of the way I couch it to leaders a lot of the time is you're going to spend a certain amount of time and energy doing your job anyway. Wouldn't it be good to know that the places you were spending that time and energy were actually going to get you some bang for the buck, right? That it was actually going to have a positive impact on your career, on your team, et cetera. So I bet if all of you, think back on the amount of time and energy that have been wasted in organizations that you were a part of on training or other development activities that either didn't work, right? We went through the training, but nothing really changed, or that we're not sure if they worked or not, because there was really no way to measure the impact of, the behaviors that we expected to see changed. It's an extraordinary amount of time, right? So data really is our roadmap. How far do we need to go and in what direction? And what interventions or strategies will really work and which ones might fall short? So there's several types of measurement tools that can lend a ton of insight here. And imagine that you got a 360-degree feedback report back on you as a leader. And it said, you know what, you really need to work on getting better at decision making. How could you create a development plan for getting better at decision making? Well, reality is that decision making is a function of a lot of different things, right? So while the 360 would tell us, okay, the behavior that we're observing above the waterline is that you struggle with decision making, there's all kinds of stuff going on beneath the surface that may cause that to be the case. Decision making is really a function of mental ability, of motivation, of empowerment, of several different personality factors like decisiveness and assertiveness and risk tolerance. So, you really got to have some insight into what is going on beneath the surface in order to create a development plan that's meaningful. Listening is another great example. Let's say I get 360-degree feedback back that I struggle being perceived as a poor listener. But what's going on beneath the surface? Is it that I just interrupt all the time? Or is it maybe, a comprehension issue? Maybe I don't do a good job of summarizing what I'm hearing back to people, and so they never feel heard. Or maybe that I'm just not really all that motivated to stop and listen. Or maybe there's some personality factors. Maybe I'm so extroverted that I don't be quiet long enough to listen, or maybe I'm more assertive. And so, so it's really about understanding some of those beneath the surface traits that are causing you to be perceived as struggling in an area, because obviously your action plan is going to look drastically different depending on which of those factors are at play. So additional assessments would really help point us to the whole picture. The personality, the mental ability, the values, the interests, the style, what's beneath that watermark that's really causing those behaviors to be observed, and making sure that we're creating a development plan that's going to actually work. So leading organizations always, I've seen a ton of studies on this, that leading organizations pretty much always take a multi-trait, multi-measure approach to make sure they are getting the best data possible so that their time and energy is well spent and that they're likely to see progress because they're focusing on the right things. So while the beneath the surface stuff, is really important to understand in terms of why we're seeing the behaviors that we're seeing, the 360 really shows us what are those behaviors. And I think it's really important because the beginning of development is always going to start with self-awareness. And so if I am not aware of how others perceive me, I may have a very strong perception that I'm very good at something or not great at something else. But until I'm really faced with that reality of what other people see, it's going to be really hard for me to take any meaningful steps towards development. So 360s are a great tool that really help us see what's going on. One of the most powerful parts of a 360 is seeing how that self-perception aligns with everybody else. And it helps us face reality a little bit better and when we're confronted with this sort of information. Some of the things that you can get out of a 360 that are really important is, one, seeing how that self-perception aligns with everybody else's. And if my self-perception is really inflated, right? So I think I'm really doing great at something, but the feedback I get from others is that you're not quite as good at that as you think. There needs to be some adjustment that happens before I'm willing to dive into those development activities and really accept that growth needs to happen there. However, it can happen the opposite way as well. If my self-perception is really critical and everybody else is like, no, actually we see this as being a strength and you don't have a lot of maybe confidence there, but that can also be really important because in that situation, it's been shown that strengths-based approaches don't always work as well until the person is willing to accept that maybe they do have some talent in that area. So getting that self-perception and understanding how it aligns with what everybody else is seeing is foundational to ensuring that somebody's going to be bought into the development activities that happen after that. Another really interesting thing we can see from 360s is how the boss perceives this person relative to everybody else. And so, there's some light bulb moments that go on when we say, you know what, I thought I was going in the right direction, but all of a sudden I'm getting this feedback from my boss that says, maybe they were expecting something completely different. And, many leaders and organizations, this is one of the ways we fail them, is that, we don't always give them enough training and support on how to have meaningful performance conversations. And so a lot of times those conversations may not be happening. And this is a great platform to ensure that happens. And so the particular 360 that Hope and I use, there's a section where the boss and the individual who's being rated select the 6 competencies out of the 18 we're measuring that are most important to their job. And it's really, really telling when the boss itself picked completely different things, which happens more often than you might think. And so there's this real light bulb moment, like this opportunity to really create an alignment of vision around where my time and energy and priorities should be as a leader to make sure that I'm, heading in the right direction. And then lastly, we can just really see what are the specific behaviors that are contributing to a perception that I might need some work in some areas. So if we talked about listening earlier. And so if the feedback comes back and says, you're really struggling with listening, well, my action plan might look really different if I just interrupt all the time, as opposed to I don't create a comfortable environment for people to air their concerns, or I don't seem to listen to all points of view equally with an open mind. So really understanding what are those specific behaviors can make sure, again, that your development activities are very targeted and focused, and you're not wasting time working on a bunch of stuff that wouldn't be as relevant. Hope, I know in you doing this, you've seen some really interesting things where these different rater groups come back with very different perceptions of this individual.
Absolutely.
What do you do with that?
Well, and it's a conflict for them because, in one sense, you have a boss love you and your team doesn't really love you as much. And then you have a peer group that for some reason doesn't get you. And it's very, it's very hard as a leader to know, what do I do with it? I am me. I am the whole me. So how do I can't change me for different groups of people. And what I say when I'm doing the coaching is it's not about changing yourself. It's about how do you modify how you interact with the different levels. So, we all know we all have someone that we report to. My boss relationship is extremely important for my success. I need to know what success looks like in the eyes of my boss. And when, Whitney just pointed out that critical skills alignment, I will tell you on average, when the ideal goal would be 100, in the 15 years I've been using this assessment, I've had one boss and a leader that had 100% in alignment. It's normally 17%. Which means that's a relationship that I really need to foster. I need to have a regular one-on-one contact. I need to make sure that I know what success looks like so that I can turn around and help lead my team successfully. Because if my roadmap is wrong, their roadmap is going to be wrong. And then I've got a group of peers looking at me like, I don't even know what you're doing. And you don't even know what you're doing. So, looking at what every different group or relationship needs and really diving into that, that's what I think the beauty of this feedback is. And, if you get from your employees that, their scores were low and they give you some really good comments and they say, we don't feel like we interact with you enough, you don't delegate enough, or you delegate too much, or you do whatever, then there's something concrete with that I can then start looking at this and figuring out, again, not how do I change myself as a leader, but how do I modify my behaviors for that particular group in order to make them successful? How do I engage with my peers differently? If they don't know what I'm doing, or they don't see what I'm doing, or don't think I'm contributing, how can I better step up in meetings and leadership meetings and really showcase what me and my people are doing? And how do I do that with my boss? But it's almost a bit of intentional strategy with every group that you're interacting with. And I know I get some leaders that push back and go, Hope, that's exhausting. I'm like, you know what? Leadership can be exhausting, but I'm telling you, when you have this data, it's you don't have to do this in the dark. This is the light that, once you see it, it's just like, wow, this is the work that I need to do. And you don't have to waste effort. It's a very intentional effort that we don't have to spend as much time going back and redoing, because we know where we're going and we know what we need to accomplish.
Whitney, I think you're muted there a little bit.
Is that better?
Much better.
I was really on a roll there too.
I want to hear it.
No, so I was going to say, so kind of backing up and looking at that high level view again is, as small businesses, we know that we need employees to show up and to really give their best effort for us to thrive as an organization. And the best way to do that is to have leaders that are really engaging employees and that are inspiring them and that are doing a great job of setting the vision and the direction for the organization. And so 360s are such a great way to invest in your leaders, to make sure that you're having productive conversations about where their time and energy and priority should be, to make sure that we have alignment of vision among the leaders in our organizations and the employees in our organizations, that we're all working in the right direction and towards the same goals. And like I said earlier, to make sure, you guys as small businesses, you don't have a lot of time to send leaders through millions and millions of training classes or spend a bunch of time doing coaching unless it is really focused and very intentional and strategic and focused on the things that are really going to get you the best bang for your buck. And so that's what these 360s can do, is set that really clear roadmap for what's going to be the best way for this individual to develop that's going to be the most meaningful. I will take it one step further, however, and say that if you have multiple leaders in your organization, we can then take this to the next level and start to look at this 360 data in kind of an aggregate way and do what I like to call a kind of a macro analysis. And this is where my nerdy data stuff comes out, because I really enjoy this. But Hope and I can tell you, I mean, we had a client we were working with this week. She spent the last 2 days on site with this leadership team. And man, did we get some pretty amazing insights out of this aggregate analysis. So, we had in their particular case, we had 15 leaders that went through these 360s. Hope was able to debrief each individual's results with them and talk about how to create an individual development plan that's really tailored to their own specific needs. But then we were able to go to the CEO and the director of HR and say, you know what? I believe it was 14 out of 15 leaders had thinks creatively as one of their bottom 3 competencies. Mm-hmm. If you look at this company's website, you can't go about 4 words without something about innovation being part of their mission. And so this is an issue, right? And so it allows us to start asking some really important questions about our business strategy. If innovation is our hallmark, it is the thing we live and die by, but 14 out of 15 of our top leaders are scoring poorly on this, according to our employees and the people who work most closely with them, what's going on, right? And so we can start to ask, are we hiring people who are bad at this, who are bad at innovation and thinking creatively? Are we maybe saying we want innovation, but then we squelch every idea that somebody brings to the table? What's going on? Because this is going to be the difference between if we are still thriving as a business in a year or two, or if we've maybe fallen to the middle of the pack or had to unfortunately take some other routes as a business. So being able to have this very data-driven, evidence-based approach to the leadership in your organization is so powerful. And some of the other things we start to see with this aggregate analysis is, do our leaders' strengths align with our value proposition in the marketplace? Do our leaders, when they choose what's important, what behaviors are important to demonstrate as leaders in our organization, does that align with the culture that we've tried to create? So there's a lot of really cool things we can start to do. If you're a little bit of a larger organization that has multiple leaders, we can really take this to the next level, in addition to just the very powerful application of creating meaningful, very targeted development plans for our leaders to ensure that they are being the best possible to lead us as an organization where we need to go. So kind of sum up the 360 piece of this, there are definitely some best practices here. 360s are something that can be done very poorly. And so you need to be very systematic in how you approach this. And, it should always be done for development purposes. We shouldn't be doing this type of activity for high stakes situations like raises or promotions or hiring or firing. It really needs to be focused purely on development, or the whole system can become, really toxic very quickly. So it really always needs to be focused on the positives and building on where we need to build. Also, there's a lot of work that needs to be done around communicating the process, building trust, helping people understand how their responses are going to be kept anonymous and that sort of thing. So just, you have to really be kind of overdo it in that area to make sure that people truly understand how this is going to be used. Because if they don't feel like they can provide honest feedback, it's going to be a wasted activity. And we want to make sure also that it's not just an HR driven type of thing, or it's not, necessarily just, one person saying, okay, we need to do this. We really need to embrace this at a more global level and make sure that all leaders, including the people who are going through it, are really involved and are advocating for this leadership development activity. There's also a really interesting study that we saw that we're gonna tease you a little bit with, and we're gonna show you the results in a little while. But there's some pretty interesting statistics to show that ensuring that you have somebody dedicated as a coach involved in this process will get you a huge ROI beyond just going through a 360, delivering the results, and kind of letting the person take their action from there. And again, action is really the goal, right? Why are we doing this if we don't expect this to be driving action and driving development? So making sure that we put some support systems in place to help create some accountability and really drive development. And then again, with accountability, the 360 serve as a great pre and post assessment. So before going through training or coaching, and then doing it again after to see, did behavior change actually take place? This is a great way to really measure the impact of those development activities as well. Hope, am I done talking for a while? Is it your turn?
No, this is all wonderful. And this, all of this supports what I do. I mean, I can't do what I do without, what Whitney and the data brings to the table. Because, when you think about the 360s, and I was sitting here thinking about that as Whitney was talking, and, you give somebody the 360 and it's almost like the old school maps that I could never read for the life of me. If you're old enough to remember ever using these, the big Rand McNally maps where you would get out, the whole country and figure out how the heck you were going to get yourself on the other side of the country. And I could never figure that out because there wasn't anything to support me in doing it. I just had to figure out it alone. And, when you give someone a 360, I have a lot of leaders that will come to me if there's no support beyond that going, this is a lot of good data, but I don't know where to get started. And, coaching is a part of that. And, and for organizations or small organizations that may not be able to necessarily afford all of that, as a resource, still looking at, as an employer, as a leader, how can my leader support me in this? But, as I say, coaching, starting the 360 process, giving someone, okay, what is it that I need to work on? And then the next piece of that would be assigning them someone that can help support them with figuring out that roadmap, because, it can be overwhelming, especially, and Whitney and I have both seen this, when someone has been doing what they've been doing for 20 years and they're just now getting some feedback that it really hasn't been working that well. They don't know how to do anything differently because that's always the way that they've been doing it. And now they have something that tells them otherwise. And I say this all the time, and Whitney and I, laugh about it, even as her being parent and me being an aunt, and with leadership, it takes a village. It takes a village to raise a group of leaders, to support them, to give them the resources that they need in order to be successful. So I think it's important to say, what is coaching? Because coaching means a lot of different things to different people in different organizations. And Whitney just said this a moment ago, how we've seen 360s done really, really poorly. I've seen them done where the HR person just walked around and got feedback from the leaders, employees, and then set the person down and told them verbally what each person said. That is not a 360. It is not. And so I've also seen coaching done poorly, meaning that in one organization on the performance improvement plan, and I don't know how your company necessarily does it depending on your size, but when, most people don't get excited to be on a PIP. It's not like you just got a promotion or reward. It's a performance improvement plan. And generally it's one that if you don't figure out how to modify some of these behaviors, you may not have a job. And what this one company noticed was that coaching was mentioned all over the PIP. So then this became, the meaning of coaching in this organization became a very derogatory thing. It was like, if you got a coach assigned to you, this was because you were on the way out the door. This was not about you being looked at for potential or for more. And coaching should never be used in a situation where I'm trying to coach you in or I'm trying to coach you out. And like those are the two things that's going to come out of this coaching situation. And I have been involved in those situations. And I will tell you, they never end very successfully, because it's, at that point, it's a bit too late to do some of those things, because it's already been observed as a more negative thing, and your leader comes into it already feeling somewhat defeated. So when you are looking at, what is coaching? What does it mean to be really successful in doing that, creating that coaching culture? And this is what it is. It's an interactive process that's helping someone produce positive behaviors. I've said this multiple times and I'm going to keep saying it. It's about modifying behavior. How do I learn to modify my behaviors? If I'm an extreme micromanager, which, I've dealt with a lot of those, how do I modify my behavior to back off a little bit and support my team in a way in which they need it? Because I've gotten feedback that they feel like I don't trust them because I'm constantly on them and asking them questions and not allowing or empowering them to do their job. And as I said, you do want to look at, what are the leader's strengths? Because even leaders that are having a lot of opportunity also have some strengths. So it's about how do we capitalize on that? And then how do we maximize any weaknesses that they have? But, as I said, the hard part is if I've had this weakness or this area of opportunity for a really long time and I've never been given feedback on this, and now I'm almost afraid to change. I'm almost afraid to modify my behaviors because I feel like I've been successful with it. And I will tell you, a lot of people have been. A lot of people have been promoted with that because, they just kind of got promoted, even though they had these, there may have been a retention thing in their area. Instead of maybe helping that leader be better, it was just, we'll move them over to this other area, and then they get into this other area, and the same thing that happened in the last one happens again. And there's just this pattern of behavior. But it is a tremendous part of leadership development. And not everybody needs a coach for, forever. It's not that someone sticks with you. It's if, you're in a new job or there's potential for more. Generally the coaching engagements that I will be a part of are, anywhere from 6 to 9 months. And then the person may go on, they'll be, doing well in their role. And then it's, kind of time to maybe do a 360 again. It makes sense. And then there may be a touch point with, hey, I've got this new data now. There's some new challenges I have and some new things I need. I just would like to, kind of check in, and how can I, again, check my roadmap and make sure that I'm definitely headed in the right direction. So as I said, who needs coaching? Every level. It's not just a CEO suite thing, and you need to make sure, and I'll talk about that here in just a few minutes when I talk about how do we integrate all of this into a bigger leadership development plan. It's, leaders at every level that, you're looking to really help. And right now, there are a lot of, your strong leaders need it. Your leaders that you're trying to figure out, should they remain leaders? Do they want to remain leaders? I have that conversation a lot. I had 3 months into a coaching engagement, someone realized this just was not for this person. It wasn't working. We did a 360. This person got feedback. This person tried, and the person realized, through this process, maybe this job isn't for me. And some could say, well, was that a failure? No, it wasn't a failure. It's somebody figuring out, their own roadmap and where they need to go. But so many existing leaders want to be there and they want to do a good job. So how do we really support that and develop them and to be able to do that? So what are some of the benefits? There are so many. And I like I said, it's often trying to figure out where to go somewhere with the roadmap you don't know how to read. The first thing that I can attest to that I've seen and myself, having the coaching process, is it brings such self-awareness to who I am and how I show up. Because, Whitney showed you that the thing I love about the 360 is my self-perception in relationship to everyone else's. And how closely aligned are we? Do I have an inflated sense of how amazing I am, or do I need to get a better sense of how amazing I am? And there was a study, a 5-year study that was done by Harvard Business Review. And I just found this not so much shocking as just really validating and confirming for the work that Whitney and I do. But in this 5-year study, and this was across industries with leaders at all levels, they found that 95% of people, leadership, think that they're self-aware, and only 10 to 15% actually are. So when I say that, it makes us all think about, a moment of pause of, wow, I thought I was helping, and now I realize maybe I'm hurting. And this isn't to make anyone, paranoid about how we show up every day. It's just like you would go into a doctor and get a physical every year. You're checking to make sure everything is okay and that you are the healthiest you can be. This is what you're doing as a leader. You are checking in to make sure that everything is good and you're healthy, and the parts that aren't, what can we do to help make you better and healthier? And, the hard part about this, though, with that self-awareness is opening yourself up to, do I want to know the truth? Can I handle some of this truth that might come back? Because it's one of those things. It's like, I say I want the truth, but then I get it and I'm not sure. You do have to become vulnerable in this. You do have to be willing to face some of these things. But, where I've come to a comfort with it is I need to know, because I don't ever want to be hurting something that my pure intention is to be helping. So, we hope that people would come and tell us, as a leader, you hope your people come and say, hey, Hope, there's some things going on and it would be really great if you could do more of this or a little bit of that. But the reality that Whitney and I find is, unless there is a context for that, a space for that, people are very hesitant to come and tell you. So, with the 360 piece of it, you get that truth, and then someone to help you unpack it and look at it and then build, a plan from that. And as I said just a moment ago, often people don't know how to change. They've been doing the things that they've been doing for quite a long time, and it is very, very difficult and challenging them to know where to get started. And Whitney, I wanted you to share that again, to kind of stress the importance of having some data to drive that. And in a leadership situation, the best tool that we have found for that is the 360. But just kind of talking about, it's not a one and done type situation. So, what is your recommendation on that to kind of keep on the path of helping someone successfully get where they need to be?
Yeah. I mean, when you created this slide about the benefits of coaching, I was struck by how similar they are to the benefits of 360. And, we talked about that self-awareness piece. I have a funny kind of saying that I'll use sometimes when I'm talking to leaders about this, that if somebody tells you you have a green tail, obviously they're crazy, right? If two people say you have a green tail, you can still write that off, like people are conspiring against me, right? They're plotting. But if all of a sudden 3, 4, 5 people are telling you you have a green tail, that's when you say, you know what, I might need to just turn around, take a glance, see what's going on back there, right? And so I think that's what's so valuable about the 360 is that if my boss comes to me and says, look, Whitney, you're doing this, wrong, right? I'm like, ugh, my boss has never liked me. If 2 people say it, I'm like, yeah, they've been talking, right? But if all of a sudden I'm hearing it from more people, it's like, okay, it's going to be a lot harder for me to ignore this feedback. And so I think that's, between the self-awareness piece and the truth piece, having that information. And even if it's not a 360, some of the other tools we talked about earlier, personality assessments or cognitive or values or, different types of tools, it really allows us to confront that feedback in a very different way. Maybe removing a little bit of the emotion out of it and being able to just take a deep breath and say, you know what? Yeah, I'm seeing this feedback and it's really time to take a look at this. And so, yeah, I think, the 360s become such a great way to tackle the self-awareness and the truth piece. But then also, like you said, it's about where have we been? Where are we going? Are we going in the right direction? How far have we gone? Where do we need to go next? And so data just becomes that roadmap to make sure we're staying on track. Because otherwise we're out there spinning our wheels, spending time and energy doing stuff and not knowing if it's really moving us forward in the direction we need to go.
Absolutely. Thank you, Whitney. So, as we think about that coaching and, I hope what you're seeing is that, the building, I like to think about what Whitney and I do is like, we're building this amazing house and there's so many pieces of this house that have to come together before, we can actually successfully live in it. But, I think about the top of the house being, your leadership, that roof, they're protecting everything inside that house. They're the people that come in every day and, we already said this, and motivate people to want to stay or want to go. And so how do we continually support them and make them feel like they're not alone and give them that safe space to do that? Because all of these things that we're talking about can be a very, very humbling journey to go through. And I think leadership, when you're doing it right, is a very humbling journey, as it should be, because as a leader, I say this to myself often, as soon as I start saying, I know, I'm probably in a very dangerous space to be in, because I only know what I know now based on the data that's in front of me. That's what I know now. I cannot live my life off of just what is in front of me right now. I have to kind of be constantly, as Whitney said, looking ahead, being present, looking to my left, to my right, looking behind me, and just checking in. And it's the best way to say it. It's a tune up. So as a leader, how are you tuning yourself up? How are you checking in? As a leader of an organization, if you're over your small business, how are you checking in and making sure that your leadership, the people that come in every day and are getting the tune-ups that they need? And I go back to my story at the beginning, when this waiter told me, we're the only 3 waiters that work at this restaurant. Like, how do you support that? Because I think of them of leaders every day. They're interacting with customers. They're impacting your business no more, more than anyone else in the organization. So again, how do we continually make them feel supported for what they're going through and really appreciate that they are the top part. They are the most important thing as far as helping us retain and engage employees. We need everybody. But leadership is responsible for so much of making sure everybody has what they need. We need to make sure that leaders have what they need. So how do we bring all this together? And, really thinking about all that we've talked about, putting this more into, an integrated package of how do we do that? So you could be sitting here with us this afternoon thinking, Whitney and Hope, this is great, but what do I do? Do I start with the 160, or 360? Do I, where do I begin? Because I have a lot of needs. So some things to think about as you tie what we've talked about together. I would be doing a disservice if I didn't, kind of give you some roadblocks to think about, or, some potential things that you may come up against, and one of those things is just being aware that you really do need to have leadership on board with this. And I mean the top leadership. So the people that are going to be helping support your development, because the worst thing will be is when you run a development program or, for middle management. And I see this frequently. Middle management goes through it because top management thought middle management had the issue. And then you get in there and middle management says, well, top management doesn't support this. And then, you get in with the front line and the front line is saying, well, middle management doesn't. So making sure that it is integrated, it's holistic, that everybody is on the same page, that everybody at every level has the same opportunities and access to this information becomes critically important. Because if you don't have that, then how are leaders, again, going to be able to support each other in that? Because, one group may be learning something and then they try it. And then another group is saying, well, I don't even know what you're talking about. I don't support it. And then after a period of time, you're going to have leaders that are basically just giving up on that. And they don't, because they don't feel like, again, in what they're learning is doing anything for them. So, just being aware that probably the most important thing with the roadblocks is making sure that you have the right people on board that's going to be able to help you sell it. And then also, just making sure that it's accessible to everybody in your organization. So as I said, and I'm going to say this again because it's of great importance, when you're creating these meaningful programs, and that could be a combination of things, as Whitney said, it could be a combination of the 360 assessments, it could be a combination of coaching, it could be a combination of training. But where we see organizations make the biggest misstep is they just start with one thing without having any data around it. And where I'm at with all of this is I get brought in because, I'll get HR, frequently it's HR will call me and say, this group needs some help with whatever it is. And I get in there and find out that that's not at all what it is, but we had no data around that to support. It was just a gut feeling and a couple of people complaining that we thought it was this that the people needed. And we find out that it wasn't. So when you're creating these holistic integrated programs, it's like, let's make sure that what we're doing is the right thing. Let's make sure it's the right roadmap to the place that we want to go, so we don't end up at the wrong destination. And that's, creating that business case for that, not just saying, well, we need training. Because I understand as business owners right now, everybody's got budgets. And if you're a small business, it even becomes more challenging to, put money aside for that training. So why would you just want to put money aside for something you don't know for sure is even the right thing? It's like getting your car fixed. And you're like, oh, here's some money. Just figure it out. You want to make sure whatever it is they're fixing is the right thing. So same way with your development programs, whatever it is that you're doing, being intentional about it, having a business case for it. If, we don't start giving our leaders some development, we're going to see an increase in people leaving. We're not going to be able to retain individuals. And right now, I don't know any organization that's hoping people leave. I mean, that's like, the competition for people is there. So having that business case for, we're seeing people go, why are they going? If we can connect that to, leadership is influencing that because maybe they don't have the resources they need to lead this organization successfully. That gets the ears and the attention of your stakeholders of, wow, if we can invest in this and we can see a decrease in retention and it's actually able to help us attract new employees and engage employees and people are doing a better job, why would we not want to do that? But you also have to make that a priority. And just, in some organizations, they say it is, but nothing much around it seems to support it. But it does have to be, how are we planning for the future? How are we planning those people on the front, in the middle, to become at the top if they so choose to be? And even if they don't want to be, they still need development. They still need to be able to aspire to do what they're doing and do it the best that they're able to do that. And making sure that they're inclusive. As I said, it should be open to every level of leadership. This shouldn't be something that, no, you can't have this because you're not that. Any access to information and helping make people better and develop them just makes the whole organization stronger. So when you look at your developmental programs, are they inclusive? Do people, that are minorities, do they have access to it just like anybody else would? And, that's it. You need to often take a critical look at that. And, maybe we need to do some engagement surveys or culture surveys to find out we think we are being that, but we don't know for sure. So, as I said, it's when people say that this is really hard as business owners to figure it out, and Whitney and I hear this all the time, there are tools out there that we're talking about that can make what you do so much less effort. Anything is going to be effort if you want to be successful and have a successful organization and grow successful people. But you can do that so intentionally. And, it's almost just like, being given this recipe for something when you're trying to make it from scratch. You do not have to do that with leadership development. There's things in place that you can make it the best for your organization because what's good for you may not be good for another, just like with leadership. So how are you looking at it and giving the best to each leader in your organization and, and integrating that across, again, the entire organization. And I do want, Whitney, the story to kind of emphasize the importance of development in these programs. That study, the Johnson & Johnson study that you found that data on is just, when I was just like, oh my gosh, this is what we see all the time, but to see the data to support that. So if you could please share that.
Well, before I do that, I wanted to say too, we got a comment in the chat. And it was private, so I don't want to say the person's name in case I'm giving something away, but somebody said, we are completely understaffed. Everybody is working extra hours and extra days. We are all burnt out. How do we support and motivate severely exhausted employees? And I just want to say, I think you are not alone. I think this is something that, gosh, more so than, like Hope said at the very beginning, more so than we've seen in a really long time. This is going on. I was at a statewide conference yesterday, sitting next to a woman who is in charge of a tier 1 Toyota supplier. And she said, we fully staffed is 1,000 people. We are down 250 people right now. We have 250 empty positions. And so everybody who is working the max overtime. They're exhausted. And so I think that's why we think this topic is so important right now, is that those people aren't going to keep coming to work and keep working like this and giving their best effort and staying on task and paying attention to quality and all of that if the leaders aren't doing what they can do to support these, like you said, extremely severely exhausted, burnt out people. So Hope, before I share that study, do you want to say anything else about that? Like, what are some of the behaviors that we can be developing leaders on to help them be a better support to these poor employees that are suffering through all this?
And, I think the first thing I would say about that is just helping leaders understand the importance of being empathetic to this right now. And, a lot of leaders are like, we're all tired. And I've had a leader say that to me in a similar situation that was described in the chat of, we're all tired. Well, that's not going to help. That's not really going to help, but great, you're tired too. But I think, around the empathy point is just as a leader, if I've got a team of people that are saying this to me, it is important to make sure that you are sitting down, not only as a team, but more importantly, one-on-one with people, asking them, what is it that we can do to support you? Short of, we know we can't, not come to work, we can't do this, but sometimes there are little things that we can do if we just stop and listen. And I love, Whitney, that when we talk, at the beginning, you talk about that listening competency, because that is right now what we need to be doing. And, sometimes people don't feel like they're being heard. And I don't know in your particular situation, maybe if you've tried those strategies, but this group that I was with the last day and a half, a similar situation where everybody has come out of this last year and a half really tired. And if we're not taking time right now to acknowledge how far we've come, that we've gotten through this, and just really touching base with each person and just having that very candid conversation of, I want to hear how you're feeling. I want to understand it. And what can I do as a leader to support you? Is it a regular check-in? Is it we need to figure out some days off? I don't know what it is, because it's each individual's person point for that. But make sure you are having regular communication and talking about that and seeing if there is absolutely anything that you can do for people. And sometimes just people feeling heard and listened to is a huge piece of it. And I'm not saying that there's other things that don't go along with it, but really, kind of ask yourself, have you sat down as a group and just maybe celebrated getting through this and what you took away from it and where you are now and how you're feeling and how do you want to move forward and what does that look like? And bringing your team into that conversation where everybody feels validated.
Yeah. And I think, to build on that, we are all stretched thin right now, and there's no reason, you don't have the time and bandwidth to be developing leaders on things that aren't the most mission critical things. And so I think, again, that's why we feel like this is so important, is like, let's get some data to show what absolutely, the most biggest priorities should be that are going to really have the biggest effect on the whole workplace. And so that's really what we've been trying to impart. And I think one of the strategic decisions you need to make then when you're talking about leadership development is, where are we going to leverage outside or external resources in this process as well, especially in situations like you're talking about where everybody is at capacity, over capacity. And so the study that Hope and I have been kind of teasing you with and referring to, I every year attend the Industrial Organizational Psychology Conference. It's my chance to geek out with these other data scientists and hear all these crazy things that these companies are doing. And there was a study by Johnson & Johnson where they had a bunch of, huge groups of leaders going through leadership development, and they were getting their feedback, the leaders' feedback on how this development was going. And they used a net promoter score, which I'm guessing a lot of people are familiar with. It's a pretty commonly accepted way of gauging, feedback from people. And a lot of leaders really appreciate this net promoter score as a way to gather that feedback. So what Johnson & Johnson found was they had, if a leadership participant was given their 360 results and their assessment results and just let them be pretty self-guided, right? They actually provided a video, introductory to kind of tutorial video that the leader could watch to help them dissect their own 360 results and assessment results. In that scenario, the net promoter score from that group of people on the leadership development program was a 0. And if you know anything about net promoter, a 0 isn't that bad. It can get a lot worse, but it was a 0. And then they had another group of people who were allowed to debrief those assessment and 360 results with their manager. And in that case, the net promoter feedback jumped up to a 56, which is a pretty big jump. However, there was also a third group that had a designated external coach to help them work through that feedback and create a development plan. Their feedback on the program was a net promoter score of an 80. So from 0 to 80, any leader is going to be very interested in understanding how they could get that much of a better return on investment and so much more buy-in to that program. So thinking about where you're going to leverage external resources, having a designated coach to help navigate both the feedback and then the action planning as a result of that will be tremendously valuable.
Absolutely. We all depend. I mean, it is a village. It's not just a one thing. There's nothing I've found at this point in my life that is a fix it for everything. It's, how do we integrate all of that and bring different pieces in to make the bigger things successful? And, that's what we have spent, hopefully the last hour, sharing not only the importance of it, but also, some best practices, some tips on how you do that. Because I truly, truly mean this, that the biggest impact you can have on an organization is to focus on developing your leaders, because they are, one of the most important pieces to keeping it all together. And I don't mean to say that not everybody is important, but we all have our role. We all have the place that is, ours, where we come in, and that's where we shine. And that's where leaders shine, is making sure that everybody around them has the resources that they need to be able to be successful and be developed in the organization. So as I said last year, we started a year ago talking about leading with care. How do we do that? And, this year we're talking about how do we care for our leadership and how do we develop and help them so that they can turn around and help out everyone around them that's burned out. It's like putting the oxygen on the leader first so that then they can get, they can stay on the plane and they can help make everybody have, a successful journey, a successful ride. And so it's our life work. As you can tell, Whitney and I are extremely passionate about what we do because we believe in it. And not only is it just we believe in it, we have data to prove that when you do these things, you can be successful. And it doesn't, you don't have to work so hard to get there. You can have a specific roadmap that if done, it's going to be work. You still got to drive, but at least you don't have to turn around and drive in the other direction later because you weren't going to the right place. So we would love to connect with you. For those of you that have been on today with us or are watching this recorded later, we are available resources to you and our emails are up there. And I also have that Whitney contributes to a monthly e-newsletter called Hope for Leaders that provides a lot of practical tips that we're talking about today. So if anybody is interested, please reach out. I will be happy to add you to that mail list, and anything you would need also from Whitney is up there. I'm sure she would, love to connect if you've got questions about some of the tools that we talked about today. I know she has samples that she could send you and she can discuss along with you. So please connect with us because we're part of your village. So thank you so much for being with us. And Dave, thank you for having us this afternoon.
Yeah, this has been awesome. I do have a couple of questions. Maybe we can take a few minutes to kind of dig in a little bit. I was personally kind of wondering, does the 360 tool and kind of this kind of coaching, does this like flow over into your personal life as well? Is there benefits to that?
Okay, so I'll say from the coaching side, it can, yes. But I do not attest to being, when I'm a leadership development coach. But Dave, to your question, what I have found in certain situations when the data comes back and there is some pretty critical feedback given on a leader that is not engaged, it's got some issues going on. And then through the coaching process, you find out that there are some personal things going on that right now this leader has, it's a lot to be a leader and to be at home right now. And, so I have in certain situations, yes, it does. I mean, you're a whole person. And so those things do come into it. But I have seen those things where leaders like, yeah, I'm not giving my A game right now. I just don't have it to give right now. So then, then that's another resource that I would recommend that leader get help with. And then how can I help that leader while that leader is in the professional capacity, show up and do the best that he or she can.
Yeah, and on the assessment side, while we try to make sure we're measuring behaviors in the context of work, usually there's some consistency there, right? So if I'm a bad listener at work, I'm probably a bad listener at home too. And so absolutely, sometimes those in our personal life can give us that perspective that maybe we weren't even willing to hear from coworkers. And so, of course, I mean, I think it's all integrated in some way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting. I had someone tell me the other day that a business's culture creates the success of the business, and then I guess leaders create the culture of the business, and that's why this is the key to success of your business.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So back to the 360 again. Are there any downsides to do that? Have you found like where it can be just like turn into a big gripe session with somebody, or how do you manage that?
Yeah. So there are, tons of different 360 instruments out there. And I have found for sure that some of them open that door a little bit easier than others. So that's actually one of the reasons that I like the specific tool that we use most frequently. And there are a handful out there that are very good, but I like because it's very behavioral in nature. So even the example I showed on the screen is, how often does this person listen, with an open mind, or how often do they, so it's really focused on these specific behaviors. And we do a lot of coaching with the people who are being asked to provide the feedback to help them focus on, work behavior, focus on things that are relevant, because every person is going to have things that they're good at and things that they're less good at. And so we try to really stay focused on very tactical behavioral things, as opposed to maybe saying, okay, tell me about where this person's great and tell me about where they're not great. We try to avoid being that open-ended, in this particular context.
Well, and I also want to add to what Whitney said, and Whitney said this, and I'll go back to her point about the communication around, if your organization chooses to do these 360s, what is the purpose of it? And, Whitney and I try very, very hard to work with the HR person, or, even if it's a small to medium-sized business where we have access to the president or the CEO, and it's those stakeholders we talked about, that even something comes out from those individuals saying, this is why we're going through the process. This is not punitive. This is about performance. This is about helping, all the reasons Whitney gave about development, helping give you, tools. And if that doesn't happen, that's where these 360s get personal, and people take, this isn't to develop me. This is to change me. Or, as I said, in those coaching situations where I'm either going to be coached in or out. And if I get this feedback, I'm going to be out if I can't be different. So I would say the second thing to what Whitney said is communication. Is when you decide to go forward with this, your leaders need to understand this is to support them. This is to help them, not hurt them.
So could you talk a little bit about like this, who would be involved on, the assessment? Is it just the direct reports, or do you include other people, or?
Yeah, so absolutely. So the purpose of a 360 is to try to get a well-rounded view, right? And that's going to look different in different organizations. But typically you're going to have the leader who's being rated and their boss, and maybe multiple bosses. Sometimes there's dotted line relationships or a boss's boss. And then the other thing is, there's almost always peers, and then usually direct reports. And then sometimes there's even another maybe internal stakeholder group or board of directors, or, there can be multiple points of view, just whatever's going to be meaningful for that individual.
And is there a sweet spot on number, or, you don't want 30 people doing this, do you? Or?
Yeah, especially not in any one group. And so like the typically we say anywhere, we want a minimum of 3 in a group for anonymity purposes. We want to be able to average those together and protect the anonymity of those raters, but usually a maximum of 10 to 12 per rater group, so 10 to 12 peers, 10 to 12 direct reports. Anything bigger than that, things start to get watered down a little bit. Mm-hmm. Great question.
Is there an organization size on to that point that's too small to take advantage of this?
I've had ones where literally every person in the organization was involved, because maybe we're talking the leader of a small company and they have 10 employees, and all 10 people have close enough relationship to that person to provide that feedback. So I would say, as long as we're talking, a minimum of 3 or 4 or 5 people involved, we could go that small theoretically.
Interesting. Well, looks like it's a little over our time, and we don't really have any other questions out there. If somebody wants to sneak one in really quick, this is your opportunity to talk to Hope and Whitney very quickly. So, but I want to thank you guys today. This is such a great topic, and I encourage everybody to reach out to Hope and Whitney. They're a great resource. They've worked with a couple of companies I'm involved with and have done some great results. So I highly recommend them. So please reach out and take advantage of that. And let's see, here's somebody under the wire. How many coaches do you guys have? Is it just the 2 of you?
Generally, it's Whitney does on the data side, and then I'm on the coaching side. And I have several coaches under Hope that if I'm not the one, I have collaborative partners that I will work with to be able to do that, depending on the need. Because, my area of expertise is definitely around the leadership development, people development. But, I have been approached, somebody needs to be a better salesperson or things like that. So, it really depends. But I definitely have a network and bench strengths of people that if I'm not the right person, I can refer it. But, generally, I am the one that would be doing the leadership development side of it.
Okay. And do you do this weekly, monthly? What would be the sequence of meetings?
The coaching, well, sometimes people will contact me and they want the rapid fire coaching, like we need it instead of 6 months, I want to meet twice a month. But generally I would say it's 6 to 9 month engagements once a month. Mm-hmm. And the reason why I say that I have found to be a best practice is because it gives the leader long enough in between coaching sessions, to be able to work on some of these things that we're talking about, and a critical piece of that I didn't mention, with the coaching engagement is also making sure that that leader's leader is engaged with this and checking in. So about midway through that, I will check in, not to disclose anything confidential because that leader's time is that leader's time, but just to make sure, is there anything I, as an external coach, need to do, or something that this person is seeing that they want me to probe with that individual. But, I would say 6 to 9 months is a really good amount of time, because we can do a pre-360, and then we can do a post, and we can do a comparative report. And so we can show growth. We can show that this leader, pre this was having a really challenging time. And I'll use the listening one because that really is a legit one around the communication part of it. We'll see that this leader spends 6 to 9 months really working on doing this better. And then 9 months later, that gets validated in this post 360. So, as I said, in anything less than 6 months, I would say it's really hard to expect something to be completely different. I mean, you've got to give a leader an opportunity, especially if it's one like I talked about, where they've been doing this for a long time. And now you're asking them to do it differently. It's giving them that time to be able to do that. So 6 months seems to be the minimum. And, 9 months or a bit longer, if they, maybe stop and then they come back because they get a new role. That's also been the case too.
I would say too, less than 6 months. I mean, anybody can kind of fake it for a little while, but is this going to be sustainable? Like, is it true that you've really truly adapted your behavior, or were you just putting a really good face forward for a few weeks?
And I've had those people that were just, and I've had to have those really hard love coaching sessions with, like, you can't be one and done with this, right? You can't listen once and then be like, man, I listened to you yesterday. Like, it's gotta be, I got to try to listen every day. It's not like I can just want one and done, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you both very much. This has been so enlightening, and I'm really excited about the future. Probably engage with you guys here fairly soon myself. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Dave.
So thanks for coming back again, Hope. It's good to see you as always. And Whitney, good to see you. And again, just a reminder, we'll send you this recording a little bit later on this afternoon, and hope to see you guys next week. So with that, we'll sign off, and everybody have a good day and enjoy this great weather and before it gets too hot. So we'll talk to you everybody soon. See you next week. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.